G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to Cold Waters with Mags, and we really haven't gone all that far from our last episode. So after taking out the anti-submarine warfare patrol, we started moving around just looking for our tender fleet, which is our primary objective at the moment, and were intercepted by what looked like a pack of Soviet submarines. Soviet submarines that we have then proceeded to lose contact with the second we have arrived on station. So at this point we're in some pretty deep water. We've got well over 1,000 feet below us, so we've got room to maneuver. We do have a very weak thermal layer at about 100 feet, which is good, except we're not playing with anything on the surface, so I would like that to be deeper if we're playing with submarines. Ambient noise is 99 decibels. That's a problem. Even with the improved systems that the Permit class has in comparison to Sierra 1, to most of the Soviet submarines, 91 decibels is loud and is going to mean we're going to need to get pretty close to get a decent solution. Alright, so let's see exactly what it is we have down here. We lost him. He turned. I'm gonna give that a soft. And we just lost him. I'm gonna give that a soft possible November. Actually, it's highly likely to be in November. And I'm gonna turn left. Now, at this range, at this noise level in the water, and we've lost all of our sonar details on him, or our potentials at least, our ability to hear even in November in nearly 100 decibel water is going to vary based on the direction of travel that the November's in. So this, the fact that we've lost him, the second one, sort of only got him. He's not a selectable target. We haven't got him clear enough. The fact that we lost the November is actually kind of telling us something. If the November was just traveling across in either direction or away from us, we would have direct line of sight, or direct line of sound, I guess would be the best way to describe it, of his prop. So we would be able to hear him. However, he's disappeared. He's turned. He's heading somewhere. I don't know exactly what angle is on, but he is heading somewhere in that sort of a direction towards us. His prop is being shielded by the rest of the submarine, which is why we can't hear it. We've lost his sonar signature as a result. Sierra 2 appears to be moving that way, looking at the jumps. In fact, very much so.
Con, helm, steady course.
What are you, Sierra 2? That's looking very November as well.
Con sonar, Sierra 2 is classified as submerged submarine.
So a pair of Novembers, possibly. Possibly. There's not much else in that range that would be a submarine. And you can see that here. The November's just appeared and we've just had a sudden jump. We're now at 95, so we know exactly where it is. Why did that jump like that? Well, if we go back to our submarine and we just take a look, we've reached the point where even on that off angle, we're starting to get parallel to the November's prop. So we can hear her better. Before, when she was over here, prop was still somewhat shielded by the hull, and at this noise level we were having trouble picking her up. But now she's gotten past, we can hear her. So just listening to or noticing when you gain or lose access to contacts can actually tell you a lot about the direction of travel, even on a submarine that you do not have a full solution on. Anyways, Novembers are not particularly fast. Top speed 26 knots, so we're going to be able to take these out fairly easily here. This shouldn't be a particularly complicated engagement. Now what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to head directly towards Sierra 2 here. But I'm going to change my depth. I'm going to bring us up to 50 meters. So we're above the thermal layer. Now, I've explained this in the past, but I haven't done it in a while, so some people might be wondering exactly what is the thermal layer. Well, in the ocean, water temperatures do vary based on surface temperature. So you will often encounter situations in open water where the surface layer going down a certain depth, it's very rarely any deeper than about 400 meters, or 400 feet rather, but the top surface layer can actually be at a slightly higher temperature than the cold water that is actually beneath it. This does interesting things to sound. It can act like a reflector, so sound emitted above a temperature change, a thermal layer, inside of the ocean, sometimes also referred to as a thermocline, will reflect and bounce back up and keep towards the surface, while sound emitted below one will bounce down and back into the depths. So if I go above the thermal layer, fire the torpedo, the November theoretically shouldn't be able to hear the transient for the torpedo. I can then travel the torpedo across the surface above the thermal layer to close in on the November, and then dive it down at a point where, once it breaches the thermal layer, it'll be detected, but won't be detected immediately. So, just to bit of fun with this, let's drop the speed down a little bit here to 0. We do not need to be moving. Remember, the Permit class does not have a towed sonar array, so moving, not moving makes no difference to our ability to detect anything. And we are going to fire torpedo in the water. Now, we shouldn't get a reaction fire from that. And in fact, we haven't. Even though we were only 3.2 kiluyards away from this November, it did not hear us. All of the sound has been trapped above the thermal layer. So we just let the torpedo travel. Now, depth-wise, the November is at 500 meters, so I am going to have to start diving eventually, and it is going to take me a few moments to get it down. And once I go below the thermal layer, there is no way the November is not going to hear it, even in 100 decibel water. Although, there is a chance I can get much closer if I can get the torpedo into the baffles of the November before I start the dive. Nope, she's heard it. There will be counterfire in just a moment, I imagine. Okay, no point in continuing that. She's managed to hear it. I was hoping we can get closer than that. Obviously, the ability to detect through the thermal layer, it's not absolute. Let's change our depth here. I'm manually diving the torpedo here for the record. So we can see the matching depth here. As I've said in the past, you can play this entire game via the map view. You don't actually need the third-person view in the slightest. So torpedo is leveled out and on depth. And just because I want to stir up some troubles here, the November's just jumped to this location. As it's gone through to complete that turn, the November's hull has shielded the prop, so we've lost our 95% solution. We're gaining it back now because we're receiving telemetry or sonar data from our torpedo directly. So it's acting as a remote sonar sensor.
Sonar, noisemaker, bearing 3, 2, 1.
Now, I'll actually go over. Actually, no, I'll stay here for just a second. Anyways, the distance between you and your target closes, so the angle change on the thermal layer shifts and steepens up, the chances of the sound getting through the layer and being detected increase. So that's what happens there.
Weapon acquired.
And weapon is acquired. Alright, let's flick through to torpedo. I shouldn't need to give it any guidance here. This is a pretty much straight shot. November turned into torp. Impressive. Actually, we'll give it a little bit of manual guidance just to straighten it up there. The November was just far enough out that the countermeasure actually triggered and worked. This time it won't. Waiting on contact. Boom. Alright, November has survived the impact. Kind of. She's flooding and she's emergency blown. So, let's hit her up with a second shot.
Con sonar. Sierra
Torpedo
2
away.
is cavitating.
Of course, Sierra 2 is cavitating. She's at full throttle trying to keep herself from sinking to the bottom of the ocean. And struggling from the looks of it. She's flooding rather hard. But she is going to make the surface. But she'll be stuck there. Short activation. And torpedo is on its way. I was sort of hoping this would start November 1 actively pinging, looking for us, but she doesn't seem to be making any noise.
On torpedo route 2-1 ready.
She must be the listener. Soviet submarines, unlike US submarines, part of the reason that their sonar packages weren't quite as advanced wasn't just a technological, a lack of technological development, although that was part of it, although the Russians did eventually catch up with some of their later submarines. They're actually quite good, and they were closing in towards the mid-late 80s as well. But early Soviet submarine doctrine was actually wolf packs, much like German World War II U-boats. What they would do is a group of submarines would actually sail out together. When a target was detected, they'd usually pop up to the surface, signal one another via radio on what was going on, and basically that they were going to hunt down this target, and then they would drop back down. Short range only, obviously, trying not to be detected, not to be picked up on radio. And so they would dive in for the target. Now, what the submarine groups would, or how the submarine groups would generally react when operating in these wolf packs, would be that there would be a listener and there would be a seeker. The seeker would ping away on active sonar, generally make a hell of a lot of racket, and would be set up pretty much prepared to start evading torpedoes should that actually happen. And that was the search submarine. The second submarine would lurk offside and would be actively listening. It would be listening for the sonar returns from the first submarine, so it could get all the advantages of an active sonar without actually having to activate its own active sonar. And it would be the shooter. If it detected the target based on the roll, if either submarine detected the target, they would both fire, obviously. But the idea was if the target submarine was to fire, it would be the shooter, the listener, the seeker submarine that would be the counterfire. So the torpedo would never come in from the direction that the shooting hostile submarine would expect the torpedo to come from. It's an interesting idea. The problem was, with that kind of setup, is it relied on you being able to keep contact with your paired submarine at all times. and it didn't work very well. It was difficult to maintain contact. By the time of the development of the Alpha, although the Alpha was sort of designed to operate in a similar manner, the Soviets were starting to develop submarines that were intended for solo usage. But earlier submarines, the Romeo class and Juliet class, they're not named by accident. They were intended to run as a pair, each submarine countering the others. Novembers were intended to originally run in pairs.
Con, fire control, weapon acquired.
And there we go. So eventually it was worked out it was not a great idea. Oh god. You poor bastard. You poor bastard. At least you're on the surface. Your troops should get out. Your sailors should get out. Stupid torpedo. How the hell do you get confused by a countermeasure why that is happening? How the hell do you lose a submarine when that is happening? Yeah, we're going to do a little bit of cutting off here, I think. The November's is going to continue turning left. We should detect and should inside of the noisemakers now. There we go.
Last bearing 281. Contact breaking up.
Beautiful. So that's one down. The question is, where the hell's the other one? I have a bad feeling I might know where it is after all.
Con sonar regained contact on Sierra 1, bearing 268.
It's sitting up here in the ice. That's where it is.
Con sonar switching to passive search.
Cheeky shit. Alright. So, if it's going to sit there, keeping in mind it does very much appear it should be stuck at this point. Yep, it does definitely appear to be stuck. Torpedoes are slamming directly into the ice. Unfortunately, I have seen this before, but I'm not sure how it got over there so quickly. Last time we had it detected, it was... well, it was around here. So it's driven straight to the iceberg and crashed. Regardless, it's not going to be much of a threat for much longer. To the surface. Let's see if we can take this out in one. I'm going to manually guide this one in once we've got it on depth, and we're going to bring it in right alongside the conning tower. Gonna sink. There's the emergency blow, which does not appear to be sufficient. She is still going down, although she is starting to slow in her descent. And she appears to be penetrating the iceberg. Okay, this shit's getting weird now. Let's just put her out of her misery. Shoot away. Short activation. Yeah, I've seen this one before. The submarines react a little poorly in cold waters to floating surface features such as icebergs, which is actually kind of sad considering the name of the game and the location it's supposed to represent. It does seem like a slight oversight, but it comes down to that AI thing that I was talking about before. The AI in cold waters could never simulate an accurate, functional, useful teammate. And that should be the end of you. There we go. Well, let's reload the tubes. 4 to be loaded, 3 in stock, and that should be end of us here. Set course 10 knots. Let's get the hell out of here. Okay, so an interesting thing happened. We've just exited the mission. Apparently, there was a 3rd November in there, and we never detected her at all. I have no idea where she was. We never heard her. She never pinged us on sonar active. She never showed up on our own sonar, active sonar. Nothing. I had no indication she was there, which actually shows exactly how difficult it is to detect some submarines. Remember, the Novembers are about 160 decibel in the water. We were at 99 decibel for actual ambient noise in water, and we could not hear her. Even while we were cruising around at 5 knots listening, we could not hear her, so... yeah, potential 3rd kill there we could have taken out, but it looks like one Soviet gets to go home and explain to the rest of the Navy exactly what we did here. Well done, but this was not our mission target. No, it was not, for the 2nd time, and hopefully we'll find our tenders in the next episode. Anyways, ladies and gents, until next time, remember to click that like button if you did, share and subscribe if you would like to see more, and as always, take care.